I don't think this is enough Damascus. It's gonna be flamey.
Aim small, miss small, that's what I always say.
It is day 36 of working on the Griffin sword. I just spent the last couple days finishing up the hand sanding on this blade. I've got it sanded up to 600 grit and the fuller has a 1000 grit finish on it. The blade at this point is pretty much finished. Right when everything's pretty much finished up, we'll finish the hand sanding on the blade and do the final etching to reveal the Damascus pattern. I don't want to do that right now though, because I might scratch the blade or something while I'm working on the rest of it, so that's why I'm going to stop working on the blade for now. Since I'm done working on the blade, we need to focus on the handle and fittings. But currently we don't have Damascus for the fittings. The Damascus I made for the blade is a mosaic pattern, and then we're going to use this big old giant chunk for the pommel. But I'm gonna do a different pattern for the guard. This mosaic wouldn't work out very well for the guard and the little spacer. We need to make Damascus for the throat and tip of the scabbard, for the ginormous guard on this thing, and the spacer and the pommel nut. So I've already prepared some metal here. I've got a big old stack of 1084 and 15 and 20. My goal for this pattern is for it to be nice and elegant, but not super flashy. I want it to be something that you subtly look at when you're up close to the sword. And you're like, oh, that's a really pretty Damascus. But from a distance, it'll just have a kind of shimmery gray look. I don't want it to take away from the gold inlay too much. Just have this kind of nice elegance to it. So I've got a whole bunch of 1084. I already ground all the pickled finish off, got all the pieces nice and smooth. And I've got a stack of 15 and 20 here. The 15 and 20 is also ground clean. This stuff has that little bit of nickel in it. And this will be the bright steel that we see in the finished Damascus. And the 1084 will be the dark steel that we see. It's time to shuffle these up. Right now, they're just two separate stacks. We need to interchange them. We're not doing anything crazy or complicated here. This stack is gonna be really clean, really simple for our W pattern. We're just gonna take a piece of 1084, 1520, 1084, 1520, 1084, 1520, 1084, 1520, 1084, 1520, 1084, 1520, 1084, 1520, 1084, 1520, 1084, 1520, 1084, 1520, 1084, 1520, 1084, 15 and 20, and 1084 to finish it out. Out. Woo, pinch myself. Pinch to grow your billet an inch. Next, we get this thing all clamped up tight. I'm going to MIG weld up the ends of the billet, TIG weld up all the seams so everything's all sealed off nicely. No atmosphere, oxygen getting in the billet, so I get nice clean forge welds. And I'll probably put a couple of MIG welds going across the sides of the billet just for structural support that will grind off after the billet's forge welded as well. To the welder! Well, would you look at that? Would you look at it? Look at that. I haven't seen pieces that were so equally sized in a long time. They're all the same width for the most part. That's beautiful. The last couple billets I made were just, the 15 and 20 was a little skinnier than the 1084, and they really had some inconsistencies in width. These are much closer. This looks nice. That means there'll be less grinding and stuff to do to get everything all flush. Would you look at that? Would you just look at it? That is not something that happens every day. I just want to sit here and look at it. Would you look at that? Now, lengthwise, they're a little mismatched, but I have to blame the bandsaw guy for that. This is how I do a thumbs up. Just leave your thumb in the normal position and then bend all your fingers back. Ah! Welder, check. Gas, check. Wire, check. Cord, check. Helmet, check. Shade, 11, check. Damascus billet, check. Clamp, check. Access to the end of billet, check. Welder is a go. Whoa! I'm blinded. Hello? Helmet? Why you no turn on? Did it run out of battery? Been using this helmet for a year and a half, 2 years now. It may have just ran out of its first battery. That was literally blinding.
Literally
Blinding. You know if the welding helmet's not working right away. Maybe I should just try it again and hope that it works this time. I don't know. The test button, no lights are turning on when I hit the test button. Nope. Houston, we have a dead battery. Hopefully it's just a bad battery. Oh, would you look at that?
Oh, would you look at that?
Why is that wired up there? I don't think we even use that, do we? Oh, there's a button. What does that button do? There's a button here that controls stuff, and I've never used it or know what it does. Ooh, that looks clean on the inside there. There should be CR24503 volt. Panasonic, made in Indonesia. Hey, Dad, got any of these?
Yes, sir.
Hey, there it is. Ha, that's what I was looking for. That used to be in the other box. Okay. And we put it in here, put it down, lock it up, plug that thing back in, even though I'm never used it. Need to look into what that does. Okay, let's see if it works. Hey, welding helmet works. All right, it's lunchtime. Oh, that stuff goes.
346 minutes later.
I'm back from lunch and Josh had 29 Instagram videos for me to voice over, so it's actually almost the end of the day. I spent all morning prepping this steel and we're gonna get this ready for the forge because I want to get this thing forging first thing tomorrow. I got the ends welded up solid. I wanted to cover the entire ends to not let any oxygen or atmosphere get inside the billet. Remember, we're trying to seal it up. Next, I need to get a handle on the situation. Got a handle here. Little weld, go. Tack. Tack. Need more power. I'm gonna wire wheel the edges so we'll have clean material for the TIG welder. It does not like dirty material. It doesn't even like this residue on the very ends from the MIG welder. Whoa, that's shiny when you wire wheel it. Next, I'm gonna seal up the edges of the billet with the TIG welder. An alternative to sealing up the sides of the billet with the TIG welder that I've done a bunch in the past is to actually use some really thin sheet metal. You can cut a piece of sheet metal that's just a little bit bigger than the sides of the billet, weld the sheet metal to the billet, and seal up all the edges. That'll keep oxygen from getting inside the billet and serve the same purpose as TIG welding up the sides. That's it for today. I got the billet welded up. It is ready to go into the forge. I TIG welded the sides to seal it up. When I do that, I don't use any filler, so there's no filler in there going lengthways. That means I don't need to grind any of that TIG weld out. The TIG welds, however, aren't very strong because earlier in this series, we did a test to see how hard that hardened steel gets when you just weld hardened steel together with the TIG welder, and it full-blown hardens it as hard as a knife blade would be, like 60-some Rockwell. So those welds are very hard, very brittle. They're not very strong. So I went ahead and went over it with the MIG welder in a few places here, just on the sides a little bit, just to add some structural reinforcement. When I put that in the forge, I don't want those outside layers heating up really fast and splitting open, letting air get in there, making bad welds. So we'll grind those off the sides once I get this forge welded. That should be enough to hold this thing closed, get this thing in the forge tomorrow and start forging out our fittings. It's day 37 and working on the Griffin sword. I just got the forge lit up. Let's go get this thing in the forge and start crushing some W's. The billet's hot, ready to forge weld it. Okay, this should be one solid block. Now I'm gonna go grind out the those MIG welds on the sides, just so they don't get pressed into the billet on the next process. I want to turn this billet into a W layer billet. It's not going to be a mosaic, but it's going to be a really fine W layer. W layers are basically a deformed straight layer. So we're going to take these straight layers like they are right now, we're going to crush them until they start to curve into these kind of curvy W shapes. At first, they'll just look like little C's. You'll have C's on one side of the billet going one direction and C's on the other side going the other way. And in the middle of the billet, the layers will still be kind of straight. But once we stack up multiple layers of that, those C's will form what we call W's. The question I have to decide is, how do I want to form those W's? There's a couple different ways I could go about doing it. I could make some really aggressive ones that curve a lot like this, or I could go for some that are less aggressive. And I'm thinking about, for this particular project, to actually do the less aggressive ones this time. I'm actually considering it. I almost never do the less aggressive ones, but I think it might be the look I'm going for on this billet. Billet's hot again. I'm gonna form the W's using these squaring dies. I think I've decided to go somewhere between aggressive W's and not aggressive. So I'm gonna shoot for that middle ground. Not as aggressive as I normally do, but also not super passive either. The squaring die is kind of forcing those W's to happen. And normally I would use the billet in this squaring die until the squaring dies touch each other. But this time, since I'm trying to make them a little bit more passive, I think I'll stop right there and go back to the regular dies. Since this billet is going to be full of really fine W's, I don't want to start out by making the W's too aggressive. I noticed that if you start out too aggressive, as you forge that billet and layer it over and over again, those W's get more and more aggressive, and then in your final billet, they're so aggressive to where they actually lose some of their aggressiveness and start to look like straight layers running through your billet again. So I'm trying to hit a nice balance here. Hopefully I'll get just the right amount of W happening in my billet, so we'll have a nice aggressive, fiery pattern in the end, and we won't go past the tipping point to where the W's actually start to turn back into kind of straight layer looking things. Sometimes it's faster to straighten billets out on the anvil instead of changing my dies out on the press to my big flattening dies. And as an added benefit, instead of the press doing 100% of the work, it is fun to actually swing a hammer and whack on some hot steel every once in a while. See the billet. I'm distracted by the flames, moth into the flames. I did not like the smell of those burning oily paper towels, so we're gonna try some Ancient Mariner pipe tobacco and see how that smells. There's enough for about 3 pipes on there. Get that lit. Oh yeah, I can already smell it. Oh, that smells good. I haven't smoked my pipe in years, but that kind of makes me want to smoke it once or twice. Hey, just need to straighten that. Wow, that is quite the banana. Oh. Better already. Well, would you look at that? Just look at it. Well, would you look at that? There you are. I was like, would you look at it? Would you just look at it? Where are you? Where did you go? Would you look at that? Time for grinding. Oh, that grinding wheel's getting small. Aim small, miss small, that's what I always say. I don't think this is enough Damascus. This doesn't seem like enough Damascus for that throat tip, giant guard, spacer, pommel nut. Got the pieces cut up into, got the billet cut up into 5 pieces, cleaned off the ends of the Damascus a little bit. Now I'm just doing a quick little etch so we can see how the pattern looks. Remember, these aren't supposed to be super aggressive W's. They're supposed to be somewhere between aggressive and passive. Passive aggressive. These are supposed to be passive aggressive W's. Oh, getting a little sneak peek now. Shouldn't look yet. Need to get them all rinsed off and stack up the billet so we can see them all together. It's hard not to look though. Okay, I'm gonna rinse that ferric chloride off. Woo, burr. Cold water. Get them all lined up. Oh yeah, that looks really good. We've got some nice W's forming on the edges, and then in the middle, the billet's still a little bit straight. As I forge this out more and we keep cutting it up and restacking it, these should get more aggressive than they are now, but they won't be the extreme aggressive type. Next thing I'm gonna do is get these surfaces cleaned up a little bit on the 2x72, and then we're gonna stack them back up, weld every single seam shut so we can do 0 atmosphere forge welding, get a handle on it, and get it back in the forge. By flipping over every other piece when the billet is in order like this, it'll make the pattern mirror itself throughout, and it'll make the all the layers match up just that wee little bit better. I'm gonna hold them in place with some CA, and then we can weld them in place more permanently for the forge. Got the billet welded up, it's time to get a handle on the situation. After getting the handle welded on, I seal up the sides of the billet with the MIG welder. I'll grind those welds out later after we forge weld the billet, heat this thing up piping hot, and smash all the layers together. We're multiplying the layers in the billet times 5 right now because I cut this piece up into 5 separate chunks. That popsicle stick shot out all over the place. That kind of scared me. You can see we've got MIG welds sealing up the sides of the billet. As soon as I set these welds, grind those out right now. I'm using my massive DeWalt 5 horsepower, 6,000 RPM, 9-inch angle grinder. It makes quick work of the MIG welds on the sides of the billet. Something else that's cool is because the metal is about 1,500 degrees right now, it actually grinds away more quickly than it would if it were room temperature. So the combination of the hot metal plus the big grinder makes these MIG welds disappear. Josh, did you see after the first forging session, there were like 0 cold shuts? Remember how on the last billet, it was just cold shut city?
Yeah.
Every step it seemed like I was grinding out cold shuts. Josh, a bird pooped on there while we ate lunch. There was fresh bird poop right there. You know what? While it's kind of a square, I should use the squaring die to at least get it a little bit square before I continue forging out. You know what this press needs? It needs the power of the Griffin. Now we're cooking. Woo! We just gained at least 35% power, people. Right there. This went from being a 40-ton press to a 40-ton plus 35% power press. I was really scared of that one. I really came down on it even. Did you see how I was holding the billet up against the top die?
Yeah.
All right. It's grind time. I think it's had a little too much rainwater on the screw. This is a big grinder, but you know what I need? More power! Power of the Griffin. Yeah. Woo! That ought to do it. At least a 35% boost there. Hey, oh, we're just getting into the edge of it a little bit. I thought that was gonna fly right off there, but that's actually pretty good advertisement for the sticker. That's turning at 6,000 RPM. I think if you put me on a merry-go-round, I don't think I can stay on at 6,000 RPM. So it's better at sticking to things than I am. For now, we're just gonna cut the ends off and see how the pattern looks, because I don't even know how many pieces I wanna cut it up into yet. I gotta start thinking about the orientation of the pattern to the guard too, because it will probably be at that spot on the next forge weld session. Time to do a quick test etch on both the ends. Make sure I cut off enough of the bad stuff from the ends. And we're also gonna evaluate the pattern, see how many pieces I wanna cut up this bar into. Because we're getting to a stage where I need to decide on how many pieces. Do I want more layers, less layers? Whoa! Oh, that's awesome. Look at that. Yes, the pattern's doing what I wanted it to do. Those W's are all crushing down further and further. They're getting sharper and sharper. The more we layer this and smash it down this way, the more all those W's, those little points will get smashed down and they'll become more aggressive. That's why I didn't want to start off with a super aggressive W this time, because sometimes if you start off super aggressive, these get crazy aggressive by the time you're done. That looks awesome. I'm very happy with how this pattern's coming out. I did just the right amount of W, just the right amount. I was actually a little nervous last time we looked at the pattern after the first forging, because they were pretty passive W's and I haven't done them that passive in a long time. I was like, I don't know, did I make the right call? Did I do the right amount? But after seeing it like this, I'm pretty confident that that was just about perfect. Introducing the You're an Amazing Man coffee cup. It doesn't have any of our specific logos or anything on it, but my sister got it for me years ago, and gosh darn it, I'm using this thing from now till the end of time. That's why I'm keeping 15 backups. So buy this one and 15 backups of your own so you can use this coffee cup for the rest of your life too. The coffee cup that'll give you kisses back. Just look at the rim on that thing.
You want to keep going?
Oh yeah, it's gonna look so good. Hope I made the right call. I decided to cut this billet up into 6 pieces, so the pattern is going to be 6 times as fine as what it is now. Total layer count should be about 510 layers. Oh man, I don't know. Is this the right call? Or is that going to be too many layers? It's going to be flamey. I think I made the right call. I want it pretty fine. So I want the pattern to be pretty subtle. In fact, I don't know. We might get it there and might decide to go even more. Don't know. I got all the mating surfaces of each piece cleaned up on the grinder. Use a 36 grit belt and then like a worn out 180. Now I'm wiping the pieces down because I don't want any little pieces of grit from the belt to be on the steel. The reason I don't want any grit on there is because we're about to put all these pieces together, and if there's a piece in between one of these pieces, it's gonna be in the knife permanently. So that means when I go to make the guard out of this, if you ground into it and there was like a chunk of grit stuck in there, when you got to that grit, there would be like a little pit, because the grit would probably fall out and then you'd be left with this little tiny pit. Like to wipe things down, get rid of all the big stuff. This is really the stage where I start rubbing and wiping on all the pieces just to really get everything off. Let's get this billet all laid back out. I transferred my numbers over to the ends because I want to make all the pieces mirror each other. To make the pieces mirror each other, all we have to do is get them lined up that the way they were before the billet was cut up. That's why I keep track of the numbers, so I can get them all lined up the same as they were before they were cut. And then just leave this first piece alone. The second piece, you're gonna flip it over. And now what it's doing is it's mirroring the pattern of the first piece. You've got the pattern going this way, and then it mirrors perfectly on the second one. Now we want to focus on mirroring the next piece. So we're not concerned about this first one anymore. It's already mirrored. We're now concerned about mirroring this one. So to make it mirror with the next piece, we just lay that one on top of there. So every other one gets flipped over, and every other one just gets laid on top. So flat, flip, flat, flip, flat, flip. And something that we can do to confirm that is, since I wrote the numbers on the ends of the bar, every other bar should have a number on it. If we saw 2 numbers side by side, that would be a red flag, like may have made a mistake somewhere. Okay, now we CA them all together. Coffee break. Oh. Tastes like a delicious chocolatey cup of goodness. Got the ends welded up, and now it is time to get a handle on the situation. Oh, this handle's looking kind of gangly. That's kind of a big gap. Can you see that? It'll be fine. Let me just crank the heat and the temperature up. Let me just crank the heat and the temperature up. Are those different? I meant, let me crank the heat and the wire speed up to melting speed. Gap filled, kind of. I don't think there's enough Damascus here for the throat and tip and the guard. It's kind of looking like we might have to make the same pattern for the throat and tip of the sheath. Scabbard. We might have to make more. I mean, this was a pretty big billet starting out, but the throat and tip is gonna use a lot. Yep, that looks straight to me. Straight in both directions. Straight in all 4 directions. Straight in 3 dimensions, even straight in the 4th. Whoa, 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 that's heavy. Gonna hurt my wrist. This thing is good to go. It's pretty much the end of the day though. I'm gonna go make a pattern for the guard because we're gonna be forging the guard out of this billet right here on the next forging session. I'm also gonna like come up with some kind of a game plan idea for a pattern on the throat and tip of the scabbard because I need to really figure out if we're gonna have enough steel for that or if I'm gonna have to make another billet or not. This thing is looking really good though. I'm very happy with the W's on it. I'm very happy with the progress I made on this thing today too. The footage from day 38 of working on the Griffin sword got lost. It is no more. So unfortunately, we're gonna have to skip straight forward to day 39 of working on the Griffin sword. All I did on day 38 was pretty much just got the guard forged out and spent a lot of time with my height gauge, checking to make sure that the ends were symmetrical and that they weren't out of whack with the center line of it and stuff. Here's our guard. We're gonna pick right up with checking out how the pattern came out on the sides of the guard on day 39 of working on the Griffin sword. There's the pattern. I think it looks really good. I was super worried about how it would look out here where I forged on the ends of the guard a lot more than I was planning. I thought it might distort the pattern and stretch it and make it look not good enough to use and maybe have to throw out the whole guard. But that actually looks beautiful. I couldn't be much more happy with that. I'm so glad that I don't have to start over on this guard, at least not from forging it too much. If we look at the other end, it also looks very good. Very consistent, nice, even lines going throughout both ends. I'm so glad the pattern came out. I was very certain yesterday when I was forging this that I was gonna have to scrap it because I thought for sure it was gonna stretch that pattern too much and distort it all and make it too wobbly or open it up or something weird, but it looks beautiful. The next step this guard needs to go through is actually a normalization cycle. So I'm at my Paragon kiln here. We're gonna heat this up to 1600 degrees, let it cool down, heat it up to 1500, let it cool, 1400, let it cool. All in Fahrenheit, by the way. And what that's gonna do is it's gonna hit the reset button on the steel. Right now the steel is actually really under a lot of stress because I heated up different portions of this and the heat was being sucked out of it quicker by parts of it touching the anvil and parts of it in the air. I'm just gonna get this bad boy in here and get it heating up. While the guard is annealing in the oven, I have a couple things I want to work on next. We've got our massive, massive chunk of mosaic Damascus, the same mosaic that the blade was made out of. This was cut early on in the project to be the pommel of the sword. What I needed to do this is a little bit of grinding on it. I think I've got some weld in it, and then we need to forge this into more of a round hockey puck shape to be the pommel. I also need to forge out the middle spacer. We're gonna forge that from the same W that we just forged our guard out of. Need to just forge that bar down until it's a little thinner, like 1/4 inch. And then I also need to cut off a chunk of that same W pattern to make the pommel nut out of. Cover break. Getting cold. Coffee's getting cold. I'm getting hot. Probably need to take this sweater off. Oh, Mike. About to rip it off and it's hanging below my knee. Does that sound different depending on where the mic is at? Hello, YouTube. Oh, gotta run that up my shirt. While I'm doing that, check out this awesome Griffin shirt. This is the Griffin holding the Griffin sword, and I'm gonna be engraving a Griffin on the pommel. This big giant chunk right here. The color is oxblood red. I love how it's really unique because it's not like a bright red and it's not like a black, it's kind of in between. We have these shirts available and stickers of the Griffin. These shirts are awesome. Get you one if you wanna look cool like me.
So right away, as I started grinding on this pommel piece, I noticed that these MIG welds went a lot deeper into the edges than I thought they did. Back when we made this Damascus for the blade and the pommel, I actually thought I ground all that MIG weld out, so I was kind of surprised to see it there. And then on top of that, it was another surprise to find that these MIG welds actually go pretty deep, and I have to grind some pretty deep grooves in the billet. Hopefully I can forge this square chunk into a nice clean hockey puck shape and these grooves don't affect me too much.
This is what's gonna become the middle spacer. I once again maybe undershot things though and cut off a smaller piece than I should have. I need to stop being more liberal with the scrap on this stuff, but we'll see if we can get it forged out big enough for that middle spacer. Right now it needs to be probably a 1/2 inch longer. Okay, there we go. This will be the front spacer. I'll have to check the pattern to make sure it's not too squished. If the pattern is too squished, we'll just cut a chunk off of the big bar here and not really forge it out. Just grind it down to thickness instead of forging it like this. That would leave it a little bit coarser on the edges. If you think about it, this right here should be almost twice as fine as this parent bar that it came off of, because you see it's about half the thickness. So every time you reduce it down by half thickness, you're gonna make, theoretically, the pattern about twice as fine. That's a big reason why I have to make different layer counts of billets based on what kind of knife I'm making. A folder needs a billet that doesn't have as many layers in it as compared to something like a sword. You need a lot more layers to cover up that all that square footage. I cut a little piece off here for the pommel too. I want to lightly forge it. I'm going to go ahead and forge it into kind of a round shape. It's a little bit short right now this way, so by forging it down a little bit, we can get that to lengthen out, and it'll give me a little more length to work with. Just going to lightly tack it on. I don't want these welds to go deep. Like this piece here was just barely tacked on. Huh? It's actually a little better than it looks.
Weld that ugly little thing on there. Nasty handle.
That's looking good. That looks good for the pommel nut. That'll give me a little bit more length to work with. I can have it go down inside the pommel a little bit more if I want to, now that it's stretched out longer. I think it's heated up enough, Josh. I sure hope I got enough metal here, because I do not have any more of this mosaic. Not sure if it works with the pommel or not. I have a handle on there. We'll see. I kind of avoided it if I could. Be awkward to flip it. Oh, we're resquaring right now.
Drop that on you.
It's just a glowing hockey puck. I think it's a little heavier than regulation weight. These really aren't the right tones probably, but I probably also don't have the right tones. Because I have like 3 pairs. I don't want that hard edge on there, because it will never close up and blend very well if the edge is too nasty. Looks a little better, a little more smoothed out. I finished forging out my hockey puck pommel. It's looking really good. There is a little tiny divot on both sides, but for the most part, it's just about an inch thick. I think it's gonna be thick enough. The diameter came out very nice. The diameter of it is slightly bigger than my sketch, so that's perfect. And it actually looks really good. I'm very happy with it. We've got the middle spacer forged out. Got to check the pattern on that, make sure it's gonna be good. And got the pommel nut forged out. I'm also in the process of keeping an eye on my, my guard as it normalizes. I need to take it in and out of the oven each time it reaches temperature, but I'm calling it there for the day. I'm very happy with all these fittings. Soon we're gonna be processing these fittings down and actually start fitting them to the sword. That's gonna be awesome.
I will see you in the next video. May the forge be with you. Bye-bye!